Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me for the first Conversations with Alan of 2026. I'm Alan Locher, and I'm the child of two Holocaust survivors. I created this series to foster honest conversations about the rising tide of anti-Semitism and hate, and the responsibility each of us carries to confront intolerance wherever it appears. These conversations are meant to challenge us, deepen understanding, and remind us that silence has consequences. We're coming together tonight on the anniversary of January 6th, a day that continues to force difficult questions about extremism, radicalization, and how easily hate can take root when it goes unchecked. This evening, we'll explore those realities through the lens of lived experience, prevention, and accountability, and what it truly takes to pull people back from the edge and protect families before it's too late. I'm honored to be joined by Arno Michaelis, an author, filmmaker, and former extremist who now works as an exit peer specialist with Parents for Peace, helping individuals disengage from violent ideologies and supporting their families through that process. I'm also joined by Dana Grueser, a mother, advocate, and a leader in the fight to protect children from online radicalization. Dana educates parents and youth serving professionals about the hidden dangers children face online, sharing her family's firsthand experience to expose critical gaps in our mental health and safety systems and to drive real change. This is not an easy conversation, but it is a necessary one and never more timely. Please help me welcome Dana Grueser and Arno Michaelis to Conversations with Alan.
Thanks so much, Alan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you both, and thank you just for doing the work that you're doing. Arno, let's start with you. You've spoken very openly about your past involvement in neo-Nazi ideology. Can you share a little about your story? What were your early entry points that pulled you in, and what made it difficult to leave at first?
Yeah, I was involved in white nationalist, neo-Nazi skinhead hate groups from 1987 to 1994. I got involved when I was 16. And I always say there's never like a good reason for becoming a white nationalist. You're not going to hear a story where it's like, oh, I'm not surprised that guy became a white nationalist. But in my case, I was really just a violent, thrill-seeking, antisocial kid. And some of it was nature. I'd say a lot, some of it was nurture. I grew up in an alcoholic household, but my parents were great parents. My mom and dad were together. They loved me very much. My dad's drinking put a lot of strain on my mom, but he wasn't abusive. He was and is a great guy and was doing the best he could. But I grew up seeing my mom under all sorts of stress. And my parents did have verbal arguments quite often, usually about financial issues. And we were kind of living beyond our means in a pretty well-to-do suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I responded to this by distancing myself from my mom and from my dad. And of course, that made my suffering worse. And I started passing it on to other kids, which is a very common thing. I say all the time, hurt people hurt people. I honestly believe that all animosity in the world, from a mean comment on social media to a world war, it's people who are suffering and not engaging with a healthy way to process that suffering, that they start passing it on to other people. So I started out as a bully on the school bus. I got a kick out of it. I literally developed an addiction to antisocial disruptive behavior. And it was never enough of a thrill for me. So I was always kind of pushing it to the next level. And I went from being a bully on the school bus to fights in the schoolyard to breaking and entering to vandalism. By the time I was 14, I started drinking myself. By the time I was 16, I was a full-blown alcoholic. And I had been violent since I was a little kid. And hate was just another part of the rush. So when I was exposed to white nationalist ideology through white power skinhead music, it really was attractive to me because it just was so repulsive to civil society. I was really just looking for the next best way to piss people off and to shock people, and nothing shocks people like a swastika. I wasn't ignorant as to why people were shocked by swastikas. I knew about the Holocaust. I had a limited amount of actually Holocaust education early in high school. And I actually grew up with a lot of Jewish friends. I went to all sorts of bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs in sixth grade, and I had a great time. And I was like happy that I was invited because I was one of the cool kids. But all of that was put aside to serve my addiction to shocking people and to antisocial behavior. In the same way that someone might be addicted to heroin or crack cocaine and they're prostituting themselves for their drug, they obviously don't feel good about prostituting themselves, but they don't care as long as they get their hit, as long as they get high. And that was kind of how my relationship with the swastika went. I knew why swastika was wrong. I knew why it repulsed people, but I didn't care because I got that thrill of throwing swastikas up everywhere I went and seeing people lose their minds about it. It gave me a sense of power. It gave me a thrill. And like any other addiction, it had to keep escalating in order to give me the same kind of high as I proceeded. So that's how I got involved in white nationalism as a 16-year-old.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Dana, you're joining tonight because of your family's lived experience. Can you talk about when you first sensed something wasn't right with your son, Ari? Warning signs that maybe you wish other parents would understand?
Yeah, I would say that he had more textbook normal kind of, preteen depression and mood swings and anxiety. He is on the autism spectrum, classification 1, which used to be known as Asperger's. So some mood and mental health issues have been a longstanding problem. But it was late in 8th grade, right before the school year ended. So this was late 2023, that he began to self-harm and was just really what I call a mental health spiral at that point, and was just, becoming more and more depressed, more isolated. His friend group fell apart. He had 2 breakups, his first 2 girlfriends, and his dad and I were separating at that time as well. And so it just kind of snowballed. And then in early in the school year, getting into fall of 2023, I had been reaching out for help from mental health professionals for months, beginning with the self-harm and asking, should he be getting more treatment? We started him on an antidepressant medication, and it just never got any better. He was continuing to self-harm. The amount of self-harm and the intensity of it kept getting worse. And then he started saying some things that were concerning from a political perspective, things that sounded very off the wall, things that sounded very extremist. And we had talked a lot about digital literacy, watching out for conspiracy theories, watching out for political extremism. The kids and I are Jewish, so we talked a lot about anti-Semitism. And it was really shocking to hear him start parroting a lot of these ideologies that are, common online now, unfortunately. And so that was, I think, when it really just, really started to go downhill from there. And he just kept talking about things that were, against conspiracy theories, starting to sound more politically extreme, not necessarily even left wing or right wing, but really a mishmash of just all of it.
Right. Like all of the crazy conspiracies just coming out, but not knowing where they're.
Yeah, it wasn't like he was like, hey, I'm a white power guy now. I mean, I talked to him about it several times, like, where are you hearing this from? Just trying to get some feedback and some open-ended questions about where he was hearing this kind of talk, because he would get off his phone or come out of his room and literally looked like he was hypnotized and just parrot a talking point. And so I was just trying to get to the bottom of it. I knew something was wrong. And yeah, I mean, it was not, again, like I'm a white power guy now, or this is this ideology that I believe in. It was just all the craziness was coming out of his mouth, no matter where it came from.
Well, thank God you were paying attention. I mean, that's got to be the most important thing, that a parent is paying attention to what their child is hearing, saying, learning, doing. But, you know, seriously, I mean, because I know it's not easy, you know, kids don't want to talk to their parents, you know, but it is so important to pay attention. Arno, what, you know, I mean, there was so much going on in your story of what led you down that path. How did you, you know, pull yourself up? Because you certainly have, and I don't know that every person finds their way. I mean, Ari and yourself thankfully have, but
yeah, so at Parents for Peace, where I'm an exit peer specialist, and this is how I know Dana and Ari, we treat hate as an addiction. And looking back at my life, that tracks. I'm, in addition to being a recovering hate addict, I'm also a recovering alcoholic. I quit drinking in 2004. Haven't had a drop since. It's been 22 years now. But I drank profusely for 20 years. So I'm very familiar with addiction in the conventional sense that most people understand it as far as alcohol goes. And if you go to any 12-step meeting, whether it's an AA meeting or an NA meeting, you're going to find a room full of people who are all there together because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's the quick answer as to what led me out of hate groups, was that I was exhausted from the process of hate addiction. It literally sucks the life out of you. And it was, I'm 55 years old now. I spent 7 years in the movement, as we called it. It was the most miserable 7 years of my life. I tried to kill myself twice by slitting my wrists. It could be argued that whole 7-year span was an ongoing suicide attempt because I had no regard for my safety. I didn't care if I lived or died. I regularly put myself in situations where I could get killed, and I kept doing it. And that just speaks to how miserable it is to live like that. The exhaustion came from all sorts of directions. I knew what I was doing was wrong. There were times when I had this inner voice, sometimes as I'm hitting someone, saying like, why are you doing this? What the hell's wrong with you? This person you don't even know who this person is. Why are you attacking them? And I didn't have the courage to even acknowledge that voice, much less answer it. And so I had to keep suppressing this inner knowledge that I was wrong and what I was doing was wrong. That took a ton of energy. That itself was exhausting. I grew up a huge, and to this day, I'm a big TV, film, sports, and music geek. I love all those things. I loved them as a kid. But when you're a white nationalist, incidentally, the same as if you're an Islamist or a jihadist, that is the exact same dynamic. All of those things, this pop culture that most people take for granted, is seen as Zionist propaganda to numb the minds of white people to make them easier to oppress. So I could no longer root for the Green Bay Packers because doing so would make me complicit in the destruction of the white race. I had to sneak around on Sundays to watch. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a lifelong Packer fan. Next week we show the Bears up. That was exhausting, and I felt stupid because of it. There were other pop culture elements that also kind of drove home how futile and wrong my beliefs were. And quite often I talk about Seinfeld because the Seinfeld TV show was a big part of my turnaround. I love the show, and it made anti-Semitism seem as stupid as it is, because how could you have so much joy from the creative genius of not only Jerry, but Larry David and all sorts of other Jewish people, and then say that Jews are everything wrong with the world is Jews' fault. But especially since Rob Reiner passed, I really got to make the point that I was in a white power skinhead band, and our band was very popular. I was the lead vocal. I screamed really loud. I got crazy on stage. We had sold 20,000 records by the mid 90s. That's like a platinum record in white power music business. And after every band practice, every single one, me and the other 4 guys in my band plopped down on a couch and we threw a VHS copy of This Is Spinal Tap into a battered old video recorder and watched it. We knew that movie word for word, and we loved it dearly. We covered a Spinal Tap song. We covered Tonight We're Gonna Rock Ya. We would have like 400 skinheads moshing to us covering a song that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the creative genius of Rob Reiner and Harry Shearer and all sorts of other brilliant Jewish people. So that hypocrisy really weighed upon me. And that in itself was exhausting, especially considering how much I love the comedy of Seinfeld and I love Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap 2 was awesome as well. I saw that twice already. But that drove home just like what a hypocrite I was and how stupid anti-Semitism was. But what really was most exhausting was when people I claimed to hate treated me with kindness. And once again, it was the light that Jewish people had shown upon the world that led me out of the darkest period of my life. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm a gifted genius. My mom says so it's got to be true. And as a gifted genius, I didn't have what need do I have for high school? So I dropped out of high school after sophomore year. I moved out of the house. My parents did their best to try to keep me in school, try to keep me in the house, but I was just really completely out of control. And my mom's like, you need to get a job because we can't afford to support you. And she had a high school friend named Jack Cooper who had a business printing T-shirts. So when I was a 16-year-old high school dropout living on my own, Jack gave me a job printing T-shirts at his business. And Jack was Jewish. He had lost family in the Holocaust. And it got back to my mom that I was going into work with swastikas on me. I was running my mouth about all my racist, anti-Semitic beliefs to everybody at work. And my mom was mortified. And she called Jack up and said, Jack, I understand if you fire him. I'd fire him if I were you. I wouldn't put up with it. He's just going through a phase.
Did we lose him?
I think maybe.
That's it. Yeah, he froze there for a second. That is so incredibly powerful. I have never heard it described as hate addiction.
My son's experience was a little different because he was parroting a lot of this ideology, but really he was more internalizing. So with the self-harm and the depression and then eventually feeling suicidal, and what he was really became addicted to was actually this ultra violent content put out by these nihilistic violent extremist groups like 764 and the first.
And what is 7-6? Is it just a group of violent?
So it is a international at this point group of nihilistic violent extremists, and they're not really coming. It has a lot of basis in right-wing ideology, but again, they'll hit you from all corners just to suck you in. So and really they're looking at just destruction, period, for the sake of it. So a lot of what my son was talking about was governments need to collapse. We have to have our anarchy to right the ways of the world. Blood will be shed. That's just part of the deal. I mean, just the last week before he was hospitalized, he was really going off on this, and it was really frightening. He was a very sensitive, absolutely didn't have a violent bone in his body up until that point. And he got addicted to watching these ultra violent videos.
I can't even imagine as a parent hearing and even Arno, what you were just saying about your mom and what she said, and I, because you froze, I'm not sure if you heard. I mean, I really didn't realize it's called hate addiction. Like I didn't, I know there's addiction for everything, but I didn't realize hate is considered that it can be that as well. Can I ask, does Jerry Seinfeld know this story at all?
I think he must know by now. I've been telling it quite often, and I know I've talked to Jason Alexander once. I also talked to Wayne Knight.
So that's really incredible.
Yeah,
people do have issues with pop culture, but I mean, pop culture can have a positive effect.
Oh, absolutely. I think we all need to just kind of get back to pop culture and just have fun and laugh and enjoy ourselves and enjoy each other and just kind of tone things down a little bit. Everybody's just so
they are.
The beauty of pop culture.
You say your boss said he was just going through a phase, or your mom said he was going through a phase?
My boss said that. So wow. It was my Jewish boss who, rather than fire me, let me keep my job. And he gave my skinhead buddies jobs selling the t-shirts that I was printing. And so while this is going on, we started our first white power skinhead band. Also at this place of employment, I worked with a lot of Afro-American people, Latino, Asian, and white people who weren't racist at all. And they let me know that when I was trying to recruit them. And there were times I rarely had a lunch because I was such a drunk. And there were times when my Afro-American coworkers fed me. And they knew what I was about. Everybody knew I was very outspoken about it. And if you didn't get it from the swastikas all over me, and they'd be like, "Hey, skinhead, you look hungry. You want a sandwich?" And they just had pity on me for being a pathetic, drunken, starving mess. And after being fed by my Afro-American coworkers and after having a way to support myself because of the good graces of my Jewish boss, I would go home and me and my buddies would get in the basement and write and rehearse songs about how Jews take all of our money to give the lazy black people who don't want to work. When in reality, the reality couldn't be it couldn't contradict that anymore. So again, that hypocrisy weighed upon me, and the kindness that my coworkers showed me and that Jack showed me, despite me really not deserving kindness whatsoever, was really it caused a cognitive dissonance that made me examine that exhaustion all the more, and finally brought me to a point. It took 7 years. But after 7 years, I was looking for an excuse to leave because I was so exhausted.
Wow. And how were you introduced to Parents for Peace?
I went public with my story on the MLK holiday of 2010. So my 16th year anniversary of doing this work is coming up in a week or so. And in 2016, the executive director of Parents for Peace, Miriam Nadri Churchill, reached out to me. That was kind of when she came on at the organization. The organization was actually founded by an Afro-American family from Memphis, Tennessee, whose eldest son, Carlos, was radicalized into an Islamist group in college. And Carlos was planning to bomb a synagogue. Fortunately, the logistics of that fell through, but unfortunately, his plan B was to go shoot up a U.S. Army recruiting station where he murdered a U.S. Army service member. And Carlos's father, Melvin, who passed away last year, and may his memory be a blessing. Everything we do is carrying forward his his idea of being a resource to families whose children are going through radicalization. And Carlos's sister, Monica, they were really the ones who conceived the idea of we're going to start an organization that's going to be the resource we wish we had when we first noticed Carlos falling under the influence of these ideologies. And when Miriam came on in 2016, one of the first things she did was call me. I had developed a bit of a platform at that time. I had been doing de-radicalization work kind of ad hoc for years then. And then the second person she called was my dear friend and colleague, Mubin Shaikh, who was a former jihadi. And the two of us really worked with Miriam to get the first version of the helpline that Dana later called operational. And now we have a staff of about 10, 13 people, all of whom are just unbelievable colleagues and human beings who just do absolutely incredible work. And last year, I think we helped 190. We did 190 cases. We helped 85 individuals of concern. If in Parents for Peace, if we can't work directly with the individual of concern, which is often the case, they don't want to talk to us, we'll coach the families regarding ways to create an environment most conducive to lead that person to a better place. Fortunately, in Dana's case, Ari was willing to talk with me, and I've done more cases than I can count at this point, but Ari was honestly one of my favorites I've ever worked with. He's a really awesome kid. He's just super smart and super funny and really creative and just a light unto the world. And I'm grateful for all the time that I got to spend with Ari, and every day I'm grateful that he's on a healthy path, and grateful to be in touch with Dana, and really in awe of her courage and determination to share her story. And just as the work that I do is to hopefully divert kids and adults from making the mistakes I made that led me into white nationalism, the work that Dana's doing and her storytelling now is raising so much awareness amongst parents to really pay attention of what their kids are doing.
I mean, I can't even imagine how much that must be doing that. Dana, talk about, first of all, how did you hear about Parents for Peace that led you to that phone call, and how hard was that phone call? Or was it easy? Because I could see it being both of those things at the same time.
So I had, been raising alarm bells as Ari was spiraling, and we had a mental health team in place. He had a therapist, eventually a psychiatrist as well, and there just didn't seem to be an understanding of the impact that his online activity may be having on his mental health, and also that he was engaging in extreme content. So I had been checking his phone. I had parental controls set up. I was very strict about screen time. You can't have your phone at the table. You can't have your phone in your bedroom. You're not allowed to have social media. And unfortunately, Gen Z kids are smarter than their Gen X parents, and they can figure out a way all around that in about 5 minutes. So I was spot checking his phone, but I could just tell by the things he was saying that something wasn't adding up. I mentioned it to his mental health team multiple times, and that I had also caught him. I didn't know that he was bypassing his controls, but that I had found he had spent more screen time than he was allowed. And it was just like, kids these days, that's all they do. They're all online too much. Boys especially are exposed to a lot of extreme content, and there's just nothing we can do about it. And this was the message I got for about 6 months. And about a month before my son was hospitalized, eventually, I told his therapist that I was watching him commit suicide in slow motion, and that something had to be done. And still, it was, this is just the way kids are now. They're all depressed. They're all anxious. They're all harming themselves. They're all online too much. So finally, Ari's rants started to get more unhinged. And he finally went on a rant that was, just very disturbing, and sounded very much more politically extreme. And I was like, okay, that's enough. Like, this just sounds textbook extremism at this point. And so and I also found out that he had downloaded TikTok and Reddit and all these other apps on his phone. So the phone went away. He had put a passcode on it, so I couldn't see what was going on. That was also not allowed. So the phone didn't go back. But that weekend, this happened on Saturday, that afternoon, and Sunday, I just started Googling, is my kid being radicalized online? What if my kid's, what do I do if my kid's being radicalized online? And I found the Parents for Peace website and found their number, and I called and left a message or emailed, or I can't remember which, and was basically called right back next business day.
Wow. And talk about, I mean, you don't have to get personal, but, I don't know if you spoke to Arno right away, but how did they help you, basically?
So, so I finally talked to somebody who knew what I was talking about. It was, in a way,
and not getting that ridiculous line that the mental health professionals.
Right. And I don't want to disparage mental health professionals by saying that, because without the proper mental health care, Ari wouldn't be here. But I think that there is just too much, this is all inevitable, that gets put out there. And I it's not inevitable that all our kids are just going to be fed extreme content and watch ultra violent content and be like this with their phone all day long. My kid he's a senior in junior in high school. He's got a flip phone and he's the happiest he's ever been. So there you go. But I finally, an intake specialist called me that following business day, got some preliminary information from me and was, just really helpful. And we're going to put wheels in motion and get you some help now. The following day, my younger daughter discovered a knife that Ari had bought online, and he was using this to self-harm. I found out later. And I had, locked up all the sharps, locked up anything he could hurt himself with, and he kept finding more and more things and then buying them online. So that night, I transported him to the hospital and had him admitted inpatient. He had self-harm covering his entire torso, front, back, arms, top of his legs, some of which they told me would be deep enough to permanently scar. He had some symbols that I would later find out were common among 764 content, also Order of Nine Angles content, some satanic imagery, and he had been performing what he called blood rituals. This was part of the self-harm. I found this out again later. He told the hospital staff he didn't really want to kill himself because he didn't want to hurt his family, but that he could not stop thinking about it all the time. And that he kept thinking about, killing himself and what it would be like to be dead. And he couldn't trust himself to keep himself safe. So he didn't want to go home. And I was told he doesn't have an immediate plan to kill himself. So we're going to send you home and we'll get him into a partial hospitalization program. The wait list is about 4 to 6 weeks.
Oof.
So I was like, okay, yeah, no, bring me your supervisor. And I had to go through that probably about 3 or 4 times. So by their own questionnaire, he rated a moderate to high risk of suicide. He was telling them, I can't keep myself safe. I don't necessarily want to kill myself, but I can't trust myself to not go through with it. And I'm telling them, I've locked up everything in the house, and he's going online and buying stuff. And you're telling me as, permanently scarring self-harm all over his body. I don't even know why this is discussion. Well, the beds are full. Oh, well, too bad. So anyway, so that happened. And then the following morning, I had a call from the Denver police detective in a Denver police detective in the Office of School Violence. She asked me some questions about the things that he was saying, his online activity. Was he a gamer, which he wasn't. He came actually into it from a music perspective, much like Arno. And she told me, I think your son's ensnared with 764. We need to get a hold of his phone. FBI is going to be in touch with you at some point today. And I'm like, what the heck is 764?
764, right.
Like, I expected at some point one of my kids was eventually going to be caught, like, maybe drinking or smoking a joint or trespassing or these normal
Good old
teenage
days.
Yeah.
these normal teenage things, skip school, whatever, any of the stuff that I did, right? No, none of that. I was going to get a call from the FBI by the end of the day because my son was ensnared in some extremist satanic group that tries to get children to self-harm and kill themselves on camera. I mean, it's just crazy. I never thought this would be my life, but here we are. Anyway, later that same day, so this is the day after he was hospitalized, I received a call from, I believe it was Kevin with Parents for Peace, one of the social workers, who did a, further question. And I told them, my kid was just hospitalized last night. This is what's going on. So they put a rush on things and were really helpful because the hospital also tried to discharge him about 24 hours later. And he was still ranting about blood rituals and all this crazy stuff. And they were like, yeah, you got to take him home.
I mean,
So-
you are my hero because I mean, seriously, I mean, none of that is easy.
No, none of it's easy.
None of that.
I mean,
None of that.
I'm a mom, and this is what moms and what
Moms
dads
do.
do. Like, I mean, I always say my qualifications are that I talk too much and I save my kid by the skin of my teeth. But yeah, I mean, I had to fight to keep him in there. Parents for Peace was really helpful with that. We had to make the decision to take him out of there after about 10 days. It was recommended by Parents for Peace and law enforcement that he stay somewhere for 30 to 60 at minimum. But unfortunately, the place that he was at just was not equipped to deal with this, online addiction to extremism and ultra violent content. They had no idea how to deal with it. So I basically took my house down to hospital level of safety. All the blinds came off the windows. There'd be no cords, electrical cords locked away. I mean, his room was down to a bed. He had to sleep on my floor for maybe about a week, just to make sure he wouldn't get up in the middle of the night and try to find something and harm himself. He was on complete digital detox for about 90 days. Obviously, his smartphone didn't come back. I felt mostly comfortable taking him home, though, because 2 days before I took him home, there was parent visitation, and I came in to see him, and he looked and sounded more like his old self. And he said to me, he was like, I don't know what in the hell just happened to me, but I never want a phone again. I never want to be online again. Just like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to my mental health. I'm good if you do, because he was really mad when I first took his phone away. And the FBI still had it at that point as well. But yeah, he just, he just started to come down a little bit. He wasn't altogether okay, but he was very committed to doing the work. He told me, he was like, I think being here is actually worse for my mental health, and I want a chance to come home, and I want a chance to put myself back together and do the work in therapy, et cetera, that I need to do. So I explained to him about Parents for Peace and how they were helping, and he would be, speaking with an exit specialist at that point. He would have to go to a partial hospitalization program, which is basically, instead of going to school, he went to therapy all day. So for about 6-7 hours a day, and that he would not be allowed to get online. He would not be allowed to even watch TV. Because like, his dopamine was so messed up from watching this content. At the end, it was 12 to 14 hours a day because he was watching it at school on either his phone or his school issued Chromebook, and then sneaking his phone at night after I went to bed and staying up all night watching it. So I just had to reset his dopamine level. So there was nothing online, no screens at all. And then eventually he was able to watch 80s and 90s old TV shows where the action is a little bit
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he was in that partial hospitalization program then for about 6 weeks. Then he did intensive outpatient. So he went back to school, but then did therapy for about 3 or 4 hours in the evening. And then he did that for an additional month. He's really just started in the last few months to really start to put together what happened to him. I mean, and that's been, a year later, 18 months later. I mean, he still doesn't fully grasp what he was coerced into doing and how terrible it was. I mean, he had a sense then, but I think just his brain has only been able to piece together little by little, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Arno, is that a typical age where you start to see these things?
Yeah, it really is. And it can be really imposing to think about, because we do trainings, in addition to the helpline work, we do trainings for frontline professionals like law enforcement, teachers, social workers, mental health professionals, about best practices in addressing extremism. And we're like, well, what are the early warning signs? Early warning signs are excessive internet and screen usage. That describes 98% of teenagers nowadays, and they're all at risk. Honestly, like every single kid who's spending that much time on a screen is at risk of exposure to all sorts of bad actors. And violent extremism, just one of a myriad of bad things out there. So it's tough to work with that broad of a field, but I think Dana sets a really great example here, as does Ari. And fortunately, there's a growing movement, really kind of spearheaded by a thinker, Jonathan Haidt, of getting kids off of screens, and especially at school, and bringing back kind of unsupervised peer-on-peer play outside, getting back to kind of how a kid should be growing up instead of spending all this time on screens. But our typical individual of concern is we're actually having more and more young women than there certainly was in my day. And but it's teenage kids spend way too much time on the internet. The parents are either unaware of exactly how long they're spending, or a lot of times, and something that makes Parents for Peace unique is that we really look at the entire family and how that family is doing. We'll get a call like, yeah, little Johnny's on the internet 14 hours a day. Now he wants to kill Jews. What do we do? And we're like, oh, well, tell us all about that, but also tell us about you, and tell us about your partner, and tell us about your family. And so in many cases, we learn that the family has some work to do in their own regards. And we have a position called care coordinator, where we'll connect families with local resources, whether it's AODA counseling, career counseling, family therapy, what have you, so that we can kind of create the village to raise a child approach. But the sad fact is nowadays is that most teenagers are at risk, and just the way our culture is putting them in that danger. So I think it's so important for parents to follow Dana's example and really take control of the screen use. We have cases
that
where,
doesn't, as good as Dana was, and I know this from many friends with kids. I mean, she said it correctly. They are smarter than all of us, because they know how they know how to add whatever they want when we think they're not, when they don't have access.
Yeah, the iPhone parental controls aren't going to do it. Putting parental controls on your Wi-Fi router isn't going to do it. They can bounce around that really quickly. And the great news is that Ari is at the vanguard of kids who are realizing that life is so much better when you're not spending it mired in a smartphone, when you're actually living life and experiencing it in person, it's something that sadly many kids are completely foreign to nowadays. So I think it's important to introduce that. And again, parents need to take control. We've had parents who are like, I can't turn off the internet, he'll freak out. I'm like, well, if you care about him living, like that's
Yeah.
how serious this is. Like,
That's more important.
Right.
You know, Arno, thinking of your experience and, you know, how long ago it is, I feel like I think we would all agree we are seeing more hate today than when you were introduced to it back then. Would you agree to that? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just social media. It's not just gaming platforms, which unfortunately are probably the most widely used vector to expose children to bad actors nowadays.
But gaming is?
Oh yeah, Roblox is a hot mess.
Ari's first exposure to violent content was on Roblox when he was 9.
Yep.
I don't even know what that is. But
it's something you'd think of. I love Legos as a kid. Roblox is basically a Lego. You build stuff out of blocks,
but digitally.
You can like put your own images on these blocks, and these kids will put swastikas on their blocks, and the platform is scrambling to try to address this. They certainly haven't solved the problem, but that's just one example of many platforms. To me, it's not a particular platform. It's just the screens themselves.
Right.
Because the most formative time for a human being is like birth to 2 years old. That's really when most of our ways of dealing with the world around us are framed, that we kind of carry forward the rest of our life. And I was a single parent. I know how badly you need a break as a parent. I remember when my daughter was 4 or 5, and I'm like, oh my God, I just need 5 minutes of sanity. And back then we'd like sit them down in front of a Lion King video or something. That was the opiate of the kids at that point. But now
DVD.
We hand them a screen, we hand them a phone or an iPad, and it sure keeps them busy. But the problem is when you have a child at his most formative age, learning that when he or she touches this icon, that happens. Like, so they're conditioned to be trained essentially the same way you would train a dog, that every time they make an input, there's an instant output. Something happens instantly. And so then they get older and they're like, what, read a book? How long does that take? Like, sometimes kids have a hard time watching a movie. Like the attention span just gets shorter and shorter. And what this leads to, and we've actually had recent intakes like this, 18, 17-year-old kids who are not just mad, they're outraged that they're not rich yet. They think they should be rich at age 18. They should be rich. They should have all kinds of hot girls crawling all over them. And because they don't, it must be the Jews' fault. But I think this really, it comes back to the conditioning of screens when kids are raised on them. It really affects their development in a really horrible way, and it makes them expect the whole world to act like a screen does. And when it doesn't, they get really upset, and to the point of mass casualty violence in a worst case scenario, or self-harm, all sorts of other things. So just this awareness of how screens affect children, I think, is really important.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I have something I want to add to that too.
Yeah.
I mean, Ari didn't start out looking for videos about, extremist left wing or right wing things or ultra violent videos or any of that. Again, his first exposure was Roblox, which I thought was an innocent kid game. It was the first and last time he ever played that game at 9 years old. And then I had some qualms about him getting his first smartphone in middle school. My kids went to Montessori school. I read Lenore Skenasi's Let Grow, from Let Grow, the foundation, Free Range Kids. So my kids were outside riding bikes, doing all the things. I didn't make them drink out of the hose. They were allowed to come in and get water, but it was hard for them because a lot of the other parents would not allow their kids to go outside because the man in the white van might be around the corner. Well, the man in the white van is online. I mean,
Right.
literally. And the
Wow.
neighborhood I live in, I'm in Denver, but it's a neighborhood that is picture perfect for kids to just run around and do whatever they want. There are pocket parks everywhere. There are bike paths that are completely off the street.
My nephews live there.
Okay.
My nephews
Okay.
are in
Yeah.
Denver.
Yeah. So it's really the perfect place for them, my particular neighborhood, especially for them to be able to do these things. So I think the fact that my kids were raised that way helped Ari bounce back faster. But a lot of this content, the less violent stuff was just being served up in the algorithm. And the way the algorithm works is the more angry you are, the more depressed you are, the more time you'll spend online. So they're not going to serve up videos of puppies and kittens and things that make you happy, right? They're going to tell me as a middle-aged woman, I get told that I need to do something about my face. And, boys are feeling disconnected. So they get told you can find belonging with these terrible people. Girls are told that they need to be anorexic to be acceptable, right?
Mhm.
It's just the worst of it just keeps getting served up to you, and it gets worse and worse and worse. Again, he didn't search this stuff out at first. It was served up to him. Then he started looking for more things. But he told me after the Charlie Kirk shooting, he said, Mom, the stuff that I had to dig around for, the ultra violent content, that's just right up on your feed now. It's worse than it ever was. And all the kids are looking at it all the time. So they're getting desensitized to violence.
I mean, sadly, I happen to open. First of all, I was not familiar with who Charlie was when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But that day, somebody sent a message that something happened to that young man.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened my phone and I actually saw that and was shocked that I saw that right on, that it was playing there. That should never be playing anywhere for anybody to see.
My son's band started a TikTok and an Instagram, and they didn't start it for almost a year after they formed. They just started recently because they need to promote their shows. They're hardly on it, which is fantastic. But when they signed up for the TikTok account, the first 5 For You videos was a crowd getting tear gassed, police brutality, a terrible car wreck, and 2 guys beating the crap out of each other. They hadn't posted a video. They hadn't been on for more than enough to just, I'm signing up. That was the first 5 videos that were up, were things that were violent.
It's insane.
I mean,
I hope you use that white van story when you go out and speak, because I think that is really powerful. We're scared of the power. We're scared of that. That shouldn't be what we're scared of.
Well, and I talk to my kids about online predators and how to watch out for them. And, again, extremist political ideologies. And my kid got sucked in anyway, because it's not necessarily somebody walking into your DMs and saying, hey, send me some, nude photos. I mean, most kids would be like, oh my goodness, I need to go get my mom. That's not the way it works. It's the algorithm desensitizing and just serving up stuff. And a lot of times a parent wouldn't know unless they go back and watch the videos, because the videos have innocuous sounding titles.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you can't, there's not really a good way for you to find out. My thought at this point is that smartphones are just not made for kids. They're for adults, barely. But I mean,
yeah, seriously.
I grew up in a time, late 80s, early 90s, everybody smoked.
Yeah.
right? There was still, is it really bad for you? Right. It was what, in the mid 90s that it came out that smoking was actually bad for you and that Philip Morris and all these companies had covered it up. And I feel like this is the way that social media is now. So I was able to go to the store because you could be 16 and buy cigarettes in Western Pennsylvania at that point in time. So my cousin and I went in, and in case they carded her, she had a note from our parents that we were able to buy cigarettes. We bought a pack of cigarettes. My parents caught me, and they didn't say, you can have that pack of Marble Lights after you spend some time outside and get your chores done and just don't bring it to the table. It was like, no, this is terrible. You can't smoke.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be looking at phones and this online stuff the same way.
Well, 100%. And you need, I really appreciate that you've had quite a year dealing with Ari, but the fact that you're willing to speak up is so a testament to motherhood.
Thank you.
Arno, I would love to just briefly before we go, because we were talking about this backstage, but anti-Semitism is often a core thread in extremist movements. From your experience, why is anti-Semitism such a powerful gateway into all of that, into the hate-based ideologies?
Well, it's anti-Semitism is a common thread of all violent extremist ideologies that threaten like North America and Europe. Whether you're talking far left, far right, racial, religious, all of these violent extremist ideologies, even when they have other positions that seem to be diametrically opposed, they all come together on their Jew hatred. And this was, you see evidence of this where white nationalists now on social media are using the exact same language that supposedly pro-Palestinian people are using. And what shocked me is that people who claim to be pro-Palestinian, which I actually am pro-Palestinian, I want peace and prosperity for Palestinian people, which means this idea of violent resistance against Israel needs to end. But after October 7th, they were using the exact same language that I used as a neo-Nazi 30 years ago. When I was a neo-Nazi from 1987 to 1994, we called the United States government the Zionist occupational government. We accused Jews of being colonizers. Every act of violence that we committed was justified with the idea that when land is occupied, resistance is justified. The exact same language. So when you see the roots of contemporary anti-Semitism all go back to a plagiarized hoax document that emerged in Russia in the very early 1900s called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was supposedly the minutes of a meeting of a bunch of rabbis talking how they're going to take over the world and control banks and control culture. And everything that we see anti-Semitism nowadays, you can connect a dot or two back to the protocols. And that's whether it's left-wing, right-wing, religious, it's all the same connective tissue between these groups. And what happens is when neo-Nazis see Hollywood celebrities and Ivy League professors and K-12 educators falsely accusing Israel of genocide and falsely accusing Israel of being some kind of white supremacist apartheid state, which is just absolutely absurd, it gives them carte blanche to just completely go take their own Jew hatred to another level, whether it's just rhetoric online or whether it's actual violence in the streets, and vice versa. As all these various angles of Jew hatred are happening, they all feed each other and inflame each other. And this, first and foremost, is a problem, obviously, because it harms Jewish people. And we as a civil society should be very concerned about violence and hatred against Jewish people because they don't deserve it, plain and simple. And secondly, as I honestly believe, our society is so much better off because of the contributions of Jewish people throughout thousands of years. We as a human race are better off with Jewish people. But the thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is that anti-Semitism actually harms the anti-Semite. We have cases involving non-Jewish families in the middle of nowhere, in the sticks somewhere. There's probably not a Jewish person within 100 miles of these families, but their 14-year-old is now arrested by the FBI for cooking up anti-Semitic mass casualty violence online. And now their child has been arrested, has a criminal record. The entire family is devastated. It's something that is going to haunt them for the rest of their lives. And these are people who never met a Jew in their life. Wow. So anti-Semitism is devastating to the anti-Semite. Not even if you don't catch a case, what happens with anti-Semitism in particular, because there's such a degree of conspiracy theory to it. When I used to recruit Joe Pissed Off White Kid, I would tell him the reason he doesn't have a girlfriend is because the Jews put Michael Jordan on billboards to corrupt the minds of white women to make them think that he's the ideal man and you're not, Joe. And as ridiculous as that is, and it should sound any thinking person, to a broken 16-year-old with a history of trauma and dysfunction in his life who wants a quick answer. Joe doesn't want to be told, like, hey, Joe, you got to start taking a shower once in a while, quit drinking all the time, maybe get in the gym and work out, go study, like make yourself into someone that someone would be attracted to. That's hard. That's hard to do. The easy answer is to blame it all on Jews. And what happens is very insidious, because when you blame your problems on Jews, you're basically casting away your own agency to really solve those problems. So the problems get worse and worse, which means the best case scenario for an anti-Semite is leading a miserable failure of a bitter, loveless life where nothing works out for them. No relationships work, no career is going to work, nothing is going to work when you spend so much time hating Jews. And that's another angle I take as well, just to be like, ask somebody, think about how much time every day you're thinking about Jews and what you think.
You, like you said, probably don't know.
Exactly. And what if you took a fraction of that time and energy and dedicated to something that would really improve your life, that would improve you as a human being? Or God forbid, all of that time and energy, if you put into studying and working out and doing anything productive, their lives would be so much better than they are. And so that Jew hatred destroys the lives of the hater as well as results in direct violence against Jewish people. And that's why all people should be concerned about anti-Semitism and engaged in diminishing it, ideally removing it from our society at some point.
From your lips. Arno, do you believe this is your calling?
Yeah, I think I'm a storyteller. I recently did a podcast with a buddy of mine, Gabe Grueser, who's an attorney and really sharp guy. And the podcast went great, but afterwards, Gabe's like, Arno, you have a habit of not answering a question just directly. You tend to like answer each question with this big long story. And like sometimes that works, sometimes it's great, but like I took some advice from him, and I'm not doing a great job of it tonight, but I'm working on it. But no. To answer your question about my calling, like I think it is my calling to tell stories. I love telling stories.
But your story really is a powerful story that, and I don't, I was going to ask it before I let you go, because it's, you were sort of tired with hating. Where Ari didn't sort of have a choice, really. He didn't know what he was in the midst of. It's like, how do you pull Ari, you were ready. It's sort of like the alcoholic who finally realizes, and I know that you were, but, you give that up. Ari didn't have those tools or wasn't at that point of he needed the help. So how do you help at that point? Is it?
Well, I'd say it off the top of my head that Ari's smarter than I am and probably has a better character from to begin with, and that was working in his favor from the get-go. But you think about this time spans. I was involved in this for 7 years. 7 years of my life I threw away for that. And Baruch Hashem, Ari was only under this influence for maybe a couple years, was it? Dana?
Yeah, I mean, really for 6 months, but he's since talked that he was getting these influences for a couple of years. But he also, once he had that break of not getting that content anymore and, being in the hospital, and he was like, I never want to go through this again. I never want to go through this again. This is really messed up. I don't know what I just did to myself. I've lost myself. I don't want to be depressed anymore. And it was a lot of hard work for him, but he replaced that time online, which he was horrified when he found out that a lot of this is steeped in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and you said that
I mean, as a Jewish,
you are
man,
Jewish.
He was horrified. He was like, I'm a proud Jewish person. Like, I can't believe, there's no way I was involved in that. It's like, yeah, it's where this stuff comes from. But I mean, there was a lot of, well, you can't take his phone away because he's going to lose connection. He's more connected than ever. He had no friends then. He has 3 different bands that play in our garage almost every day of the week now. He went out with friends after school. He does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He does CrossFit. He has more friends than ever. He's more connected than ever. He doesn't need his phone to be connected. He's got a flip phone. That's good enough. It's a pain in the butt to text on. But
but if that's your biggest problem.
Right, exactly. But I mean, he had all this time on his hands. He's completely rebuilt his entire life. I couldn't be more proud of him. I mean, he's the hero of the story, really.
Oh, I want to be Ari when I grow up.
Same. I want to be my kid when I grow up.
But to answer your question about, Ari and I probably had, I don't know, 20 sessions maybe over the time we were working together, like once a week. And in all of those sessions, honestly, we spent probably 90% of it talking about music and movies. I turned Ari on to Spinal Tap, of course. Well, you have to.
How about Seinfeld?
Yeah, and Seinfeld's a given, but yeah, being in a band, I'm like, you got to watch this movie, dude.
Spinal Tap.
And we just had a lot of fun talking. There were times when we got serious and talked about current events, talked about radicalization, talked about violent extremism, but the crux of really reaching someone has a lot to do with modeling the behavior that you're trying to see. And in my case, it's just modeling happiness. Like when Ari and I were talking, we were having a great time. We're laughing. We're having an awesome conversation. I have some cases where I feel like I'm just beating my head against the wall and it's miserable. But every case I had with Ari, I was like, cool, it's Ari today. Like I was looking forward to it. And when you are in a position where you're feeling depressed, you're feeling inadequate, you're feeling afraid, and you're talking to someone who's like modeling what genuine happiness looks like, you're like, okay, this is, that's where I want to be. And so I'm not saying necessarily that, I'm the one who showed Ari what happiness looks like, because I know Dana's an amazing mom and he's had all kinds of happiness in his life. But sometimes when you're in that point, especially someone who's been through this as well. I talked a lot about my past with Ari and all the stupid things I did and all the mistakes I made. And I think that resonated with him, and it really kind of set the stage for us to have more of a rapport. And it's something I'm really grateful for. And as Dana pointed out, like Ari's doing awesome right now. So,
well, you're both storytellers, and these stories that you now share that you both have lived are truly going to help a lot. And I can only imagine, Arno, I mean, Dana, you're new to sharing this story, but Arno, you've been doing this for a very long time. And I can only imagine how many you have helped by just sharing your truth. And thank you for that, because I know it's now easy. I'm sure it wasn't at the beginning. But thank you both.
It's an honor. And when I'm telling stories, people are listening to me, and being listened to is a big part of life. I think of being a healthy, well-adjusted human being. We got to feel like we're listened to sometimes. And a lot of times working with our individuals concerned is they don't feel like anyone's listening to them. So as much as I can talk up a storm, I do a lot of listening as well. And I think that's something that we can all be mindful of. I think listening is really underrated. And so if you take away anything, just take away how important it is to listen to each other. And the more we do that, the better off we're going to be.
I mean, I couldn't end on a better note. I mean, people have always asked sort of, why do I keep doing this? And I didn't realize when I started, I did it, it was entertainment that I wanted to do and cheer people up, because I started this when the pandemic happened. But I really believe by listening, we can all learn from each other. And that is why I continue to do this, because we really can if we listen.
Well, thanks for doing that, Alan. We're honored to be on with you tonight, and we appreciate the light that you shine on the world.
I can't wait to hear someday Ari speaking about this, because I feel he is going to follow in both of your footsteps and do that at some point.
I hope so. I think you probably well, I hope someday he speaks about it. He has encouraged his band members to put their phones away in another room during band practice. Yeah.
Well, right there, they're learning from him. If they listen and do that, they're learning from him. So that's a step right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You'll probably hear him out playing music first, but anyways,
well, that's good. That brings him joy, right? So that's
yeah. And like I said, it's all about the connection. I mean, Arno's talking about, they just shot the breeze or whatever, but that was a connection for him, and he needed that at that time. He needed real connection that was healthy connection and healthy modeling, right? So, and somebody other than his, mom, who is old and doesn't know anything because he's a teenager.
Well, none of us kids wanted to listen to our mom. You as well. Mom said don't smoke. I'm sure you still smoked.
Yeah, for quite a while. Anyway, but yeah, I just I couldn't be more thankful for what Parents for Peace did for him. Without them, I really would have been adrift, honestly. So,
well, thank you both so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Stay well.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. My sincere thanks to Arno Michaelis and Dana Grueser for their honesty, courage, and for the work they continue to do to help families, protect children, and pull people back from the edge of radicalization and hate. I am grateful to both of them for sharing their experiences and their insights with us tonight. As I leave you, remember, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard thing, and let's all fight hate for good. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. Please share this with your friends and your family. And until the next conversation, please stay safe. And I will just add that the website for Parents for Peace is down below right here on YouTube. Good night, everybody.